We are here to bring a new type of news show.
New insight, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. Bring news just for you. It's Monday, March 10th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and great to have you with us on News Generation. Joining us today is Ki Kim.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. And we're pleased to join by a new panelist. She is Rosita Idris. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, I'm Rosita from Brunei, and it's wonderful to be here today.
It's wonderful to have you on our show. Welcome.
Thank you.
And both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. So Monday is when we start off the week with topics grabbing the attention of young people. Previously on NewsGen, we talked about Korea's deep-rooted enthusiasm for early education, a trend where children, even before entering elementary school, are enrolled in cram schools for subjects like English, math, sports, and the arts. And this passion for early education has once again ignited intense debate here in the country, particularly with the rise of a phenomenon known as the 7-year-old Gosi, which is named after Korea's notoriously difficult specialty exams for lawyers or doctors and etc. called Gosi. So Rosita, starting off, have you ever came across this term before?
I recently learned about the 7-year-old Gosi in detail while preparing for something, but I had only a vague idea about it before. And after living in Seoul for about 5 years, I realized how intense South Korea's emphasis on education is, especially in terms of investment in English education. This culture has been a hot topic in Korea lately.
And which is the reason why we brought up this as our main topic for today's discussion here on NewsGen. So now to you, Ki, for our viewers who might not be familiar with the term 7-year-old Gosi, could you please break us down what this concept is? And also, when we talk about this early education craze in Korea, we must talk about the popular Daechidong district, Daechidong area. So please tell us more about that too.
So Daechidong is like a symbol of private education in Korea. So we even sometimes ask, our friends, are you Daechidong kids?
Right.
Are you Daechidong kid?
Frankly, I'm not.
Okay. Well, I'm not either. But when I come to work here to Arirang, I always pass by Daechidong, the main street, and I can always see that the cars lined up either side picking up the kids. And as a matter of fact, I also have been teaching English for a little more than 10 years in Daechidong for quite some time, a long time ago, and I know how they are. So lately, Daechidong has been in the spotlight, and it has become a main item for many different contents like YouTube, drama, and movies. Moms giving a ride to kids, mimicking obsessive moms, star teachers at certain private academies. There's even a drama named 일타 Scandal, or Crash Course in Romance, starring Jeon Do-yeon and Jung Kyung-ho, featuring private education in Korea. So 7 Gosi we talked about earlier isn't actually a recently born term. It's been there for a couple of decades. This aims those kids in kindergarten who are about to get into elementary school or who wish to get into a prestigious school, or in this case, whose parents wish their kids to go into so-called well-received schools. And they have to take a level test or sort of an entrance exam. Right. So they have to get ready for that before turning 7-year-old. So they have roughly 2 years to get ready before they turn 7.
Right. And what this concept of the 7-year-old Gosi really stunned many here in the country is because we are well aware that there are cram schools preparing students to get into the top universities that many people say. But we're talking about students who are younger than the elementary school age. As Ki mentioned, they may be 7 or they may be 5, and these tests are preparing them to get into a prestigious cram school, not just a prestigious school, which is really a completely new concept for even us here in Korea. Now, I also want to mention that this is something that deeply impacts our generation because many of us, millennials and Gen Z here in the country, were the first to go through this intensive early education culture, and now, as we step into parenthood, we're facing a major dilemma, which is, should we put our kids through the same system or take sort of a different approach? So Ki, I want to ask you once again, because you're a parent yourself, where do you stand on this? And more broadly, what's the general public sentiment towards this early education fever here in the country?
Well, my son exactly is in this mid-spot as
Right.
he just turned 6. And I decided I would not send him to this English-based kindergarten, or what we call 영어 유치원 in Korea. It's not because they're expensive or I speak English. I think it was not necessary. And many of the government-run kindergartens also offer English classes, which are legitimate. And I think that's enough. And that age, I just wish for my kid, my son, to play, enjoy his life. But at the same time, I'm paying a couple $100 extra for for him in private Korean and math classes. Teacher comes once a week and spend an hour with him. English is not mandatory, but I would at least want him to compete with other kids at the same level when he enters elementary school, so he wouldn't have a language barrier in terms of reading Korean. And I know I have to get involved more, but as I've been teaching for quite a long time, you can never teach your own child. And I'm getting a little help from outside. And as for math, he just loves numbers. And I know many MZers would agree with me or disagree with me, but many of them did experience this early or private education, so they would know ups and downs. If it's too much oriented to entering the good college only, that would be the problem. But a certain level of private education would definitely help, especially in this fierce competitive environment.
Right.
But of course, some would disagree, saying this would be too much of competition and it is a waste of money.
So we've now heard from a Korean parent. Now I'm going to ask you, Rosita, although you don't have a kid now. So let's say if you were raising a child in Korea, I want to ask you, what approach do you think you take?
So I've been an English instructor in Korea for quite a long time. And through that experience, I've met many parents. A lot of them enrolled their children in private education simply because everyone else is doing it.
Right.
While others were incredibly dedicated and hardworking in educating their kids, which I found pretty impressive. And at the same time, I also felt that the level of studying here was extremely intense and the competition was fierce. I often thought it would be nice if children could play as much as they study. So if I were to raise a child in Korea, I think I would inevitably have to consider private education. With such competitive environment, I admit it would be difficult not to. However, I would also try to find balance so that my child could enjoy their childhood instead of being overwhelmed by endless studying.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that you mentioned this keyword that really sums up our discussion today, which is balance. Because as with many things in life, balance is key. Now, early education can be an incredible tool if it helps children explore their talents and passions rather than simply pushing them into a high-pressure environment. So if I could take myself as an example, I was very fortunate to attend an English kindergarten where I got to discover my love for learning the language, which is English. And I think that that experience eventually led me here working as a reporter at an English language broadcaster. So if done right, early education can be a stepping stone rather than a burden. So we're now going to broaden our discussion a bit. So I want to ask you, are there any other countries around the world where early childhood education is as passionate and enthusiastic as in Korea?
Well, education anywhere around the world is very important, but specifically Singapore, India, and China are all well known for their passion and love for education, and they even have a more fierce environment than Korea. Take India, for example. There's even a saying from a father to a son, son, you can be anything in the future, either engineer or a doctor. And that's, of course, a joke, but if you compare the amount of money spent for education from a household between Korea and India, India spends about 11%, whereas Korea spends 7%. So you can tell that India is quite serious about the education. China, on the other hand, though the gap between the rich and the poor is quite huge, spending a lot of money on education, especially when kids are young. There are many English language camps that's taking place around the world, and countless private academies that's taking, all over the country for young kindergarten kids.
So this definitely isn't a phenomenon that we're just seeing in Korea.
Right.
Then, Rosina, I want to ask you the situation in Brunei.
Okay, so well, in our case, it seems like early childhood education isn't as prevalent as in Korea. Not saying it's not important. People do teach their kids at home, but just that without the need for private tutors. And also considering the age, children in Brunei usually start kindergarten at around age 4 to 5 years old, which is about 1 to 2 years later than Korean kids. So in particular, Korea places a strong emphasis on early English education, whereas in Brunei, English is considered as one of the native languages, so there's no need to push the children to learn it intensively. Because of this, it naturally reduces the pressure to start English education at an early age.
I see. All right, so we're now going to take the time to look at what our viewers think. We also asked them whether early childhood education is playing a big role in their countries. Let's take a look at some of their responses. Our first response for this Monday is by Gurmarita. In Italy, children are not required to learn anything before kindergarten. In kindergarten, they just learn social skills by being together and doing crafts and are not required to learn the alphabet or hold pens. The best part for me was learning table manners when lunch was served. Our second comment for this Monday is from the Philippines. Benny D97. Children in the Philippines have a chance to learn the alphabet and mathematics before going to school. Our final comment is by UFSA22. Most kids in the United States learn to read fluently before 1st and 3rd grade, so I'd say they aren't actively involved in early education. So we've taken a look at the early education system here in Korea and in other parts of the world. Now to dive deeper, we'll be speaking with an education expert after a short break. Stay with us.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang.News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
Welcome back. To help us better understand today's topic, joining us today is Dr. Park Nam-gi, former president of Gwangju National University of Education. Welcome to the show, Dr. Park.
Good morning.
Good morning and
Nice
happy
to see you.
Monday. Nice to see you as well.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Dr. Park, our first question for you is South Korea is known for its highly competitive early education market, as we've discussed on the top of their show. So, what do you think is driving this intense focus on early education here in the country?
Yes. This intense focus stems from several key factors. The first, Korea's meritocratic society places a strong emphasis on individual academic achievement. Whether you are poor or rich or high or low level, it doesn't matter. Your children should have good academic achievement. So university admissions and job opportunities are largely determined by test scores on educational background. This leads to a heavy reliance on early education as a way to secure future success of your children. Second, there is a significant gap in the quality and reputation of universities, reinforcing a culture where prestigious degrees strongly influence career prospects. As a result, parents feel immense pressure to provide the best possible education from early age. And additionally, economic polarization and job market dualization have deepened, making stable, well-paying jobs harder to attain. While a weaker social security system, parents see education as the most reliable investment in their child's future. And many parents now have enough money to support their children. That's one other reason.
Thank you, Doctor, for your insights and information, the background of South Korean environment on education. And what are some of the key benefits and drawbacks of starting education at such a young age?
Yes, the impact of early education depends on how it is implemented. If done correctly, by discovering and nurturing a child's natural talents and considering development stages and tailoring education to their individual needs, it can be beneficial. However, when parental pressure becomes excessive, early education can do more harm than good. So, for example, these days, many kids are forced to go to the cram school in early age, but pushing English or advanced math on toddlers who haven't yet developed basic language and reasoning skills can negatively impact brain development. So some experts highlight several key concerns about early private education. There's a reduced brain plasticity and decreased motivation and weakening emotional and social challenges. So experts recommend the natural, interest-based learning environment that respects a child's development pace. So it is crucial to shift the focus from only academic competition to creating a supportive and enjoyable learning experience, I think.
Okay, thank you so much for your insights, Doctor. I do agree with your points. So some critics argue that early education places excessive stress on children, fostering a hyper-competitive atmosphere that can be detrimental to their well-being. In your view, how should Korea's early education model evolve moving forward?
Yes, to improve Korea's early education model, we need a balanced approach that meets the both educational and developmental needs. So first, public kindergarten should strengthen their academic role while maintaining play-based learning. So it goes to the play-based learning, and parents feel a little scared that their kid cannot learn any academic skills. So this means integrating age-appropriate language, math, and even English program based on parental feedback. And second, parents should receive training on effective early education methods before sending their children to school. So parents really need education. Even if we do some small things, we learn something before, but raising child really need a lot of education for parents. So providing interactive online resources and community-based knowledge can help parents make informed decisions. And third, raising awareness about the benefits and risks of early private education is essential. Parents need accurate information to avoid excessive pressure on their children. And finally, collaboration between civic groups, education offices, and private institutions can help create policies that promote healthy early education while reducing harmful competition. So by making these changes, we can encourage that early education supports children's natural growth while preparing them for future learning, I think.
Right, so education for parents so that they can better educate their children. All right, Dr. Park, thank you so much for your time today. Have a great start to a new week.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So ending off, to ensure that early education is seen as an opportunity rather than a burden, I want to ask our panelists, what improvements do you think can be made to Korea's early education system?
Well, I've taught English probably about 13 or 14 years. I probably taught all different brackets of students ranging from 3 or 4-year-old to elementary school students, high school students, TOEIC, TOEFL, or college entrance exams, or cram school students. And I even developed some of the curriculums when the English kindergarten was first introduced. The problem is, every time when we try to have kids learn something, the kids has to have some interest in it.
Right.
So it has to be children-oriented, but mostly it seems like parents are driving source, right? And every year we see less and less child being born, right? The birth rate is also the country's problem. Then the education, and then every time we see the presidential election, the education is one of their main policies as well, right? So what I wish is that there needs a change in the public sentiment as well, because we need to find out what each child needs. It's not about the English, mathematics, science. The child has their own, skills and their own power and their own, skills, right? And also having a assessment on the private education is not the only solution, because I know when the recession was implemented in each private education, what happened was they did it in secret way.
Right. After 10 p.m., right?
Exactly, and it got more expensive somehow, right? Because they have to take a risk as well. So I think number one is parents, and as an MZer now, need to change our perspective, and education should be focused on what each child needs instead of what we think they need.
Right. I think child-oriented education is very important because parents, they are doing this because they want the best for their children. But if they don't make child-oriented decisions, then that could have an opposite effect, right?
Yeah, and a lot of parents actually, to be honest, try to reflect their childhood on their children. And that's one of the things that, one of the mistakes that they make all the time.
Definitely. And what do you suggest, Rosita?
Okay, so before I start, just a disclaimer, my opinion is my own. I mean, I'm still single and I do not know what it's like to raise a children yet. But I believe that children should start education at a pace that allows them to develop socially and cognitively before focusing too heavily on academics. So in Korea, where early English and math prep begins as young as age 3, I feel that a shift to play-based learning like storytelling and interactive activities like field trips or hands-on activities would help children develop naturally rather than through rigid memorization.
Right.
Also, not to mention that the reliance on hagwons or cram school creates a significant burden on parents. And I think strengthening public after-school programs could ease this pressure. And yeah, so I also wish that children could play as much as they study, like as I mentioned before. While early competition and rankings are prioritized, instead of just aiming for top grades, a more balanced approach like normalizing multiple pathways to success, not just top universities, could help foster a genuine love for learning and would allow children to actually thrive without feeling overwhelmed. Yeah.
So building more of a stress-free environment
Yes.
for the students, and all for an education system that does more good, way more good than harm. And that's all we have for this episode of News Generation, but we will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks to Ki Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Rosita Idris.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
It was
to
a
have you.
pleasure. Yeah.
And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in and hope you have a great start to a new week. We are News
News Generation.